Hello everybody and welcome to Sports Source, your number one source of sports, and today we're talking about if the Boston Celtics are true title contenders. But before we do that, smash that like button and subscribe for more NBA news and discussions. Without further ado, let's begin the video. So the Boston Celtics are off to an awesome start. They're 11-2 right now as I'm making this video, and they've just been dominating the league, and lots of people didn't really expect this team to be dominating the league this much. Yeah, people expected them to be a 4, 5, even 3 seed, maybe some said 2 seed, but they're the first seed in the league right now, and it's looking like that they're one of the top threats in the East. But are they true title contenders? Well, today we're going to be looking at some stats, some data, and what's really changed with this team compared to last year, and why we might be considering them as title contenders for this season. So let's just look at last year's team, because that's a big comparison, because that last year's team was supposed to be very good, but they really fell off, and they had all these expectations that they did not reach. But let's look at them. So for points per game, they were 12th in the league last year. Also for defense, they were the 3rd best defensive team in the league, with the 5th best, or the 5th highest pace in the whole entire league. And their offensive points per 100 possessions was 12th. Their defense per 100 possessions was 2nd best. So obviously they had an elite defense last year, which is usually typical for Boston teams, because Brad Stevens is such a good coach when it comes to defense, and his players usually buy into defense a lot. And then you got 3-point percentage. They were 7th. Rebounds, they were 22nd, so rebounding wasn't very good. And in the clutch, they were 23 and 19. So in the clutch, they weren't very good, and that team really fell apart for a couple of reasons. All of just the chemistry and just lots of things going on, the expectations, all the locker room managements, just people not having a role, and people trying to find their fit on the team. It just all fell apart. But for this year's 2019 and 2020 Celtics team, points per game, they are 10th. So they actually got better offensively than last year. I'm going to be talking about that more in depth and why they did in a little bit. Defensively, they're now the 7th best defensive team. And, most of that has to do with Al Horford. I think that if Al Horford was on the team, their defense would be way better. But I think that was their biggest loss of the offseason, but we're going to be talking about that a little bit later. And they're 17th in pace, which you might think that, that's bad that their pace has gone down. But further on, we're going to talk about how that's actually very good. And that's because for offensive points per game, per 100 possessions, they're first. So they're the most efficient, the best offensive team in the league, I'd say, because they almost have 4 20-point per game scorers. They are extremely efficient, all of them, and they have the best offense in the league, in my opinion. They might not have the star power of, let's say, the Lakers duo or the Rockets duo or the Clippers duo, but they are a very, very deep offensive team. If we look at the averages for some of their players, we got Jaylen Brown, who's averaging 20 points per game. You got Hayward averaging 19. Marcus Smart is averaging 12 points per game and 5 assists a game while providing amazing defense. Then you got Jayson Tatum putting up 20 points inefficiently, but he's still putting up 20. And then you got Kemba who's putting up 23 points and 5 assists. So that team offensively, they almost have 4 20-point per game scorers, along with Marcus Smart, who's a decent scorer. I mean, he's not really there to score, but he can score. And then you look at their 3-point percentage, it's 7th. So their 3 points didn't really go down in percentage at all. Their rebounds did go up, and it's 13th in the league instead of last year was 22nd. And then they are 6-1 in the clutch right now. And for turnovers, they actually have the least amount of turnovers in the whole league. So just the coaching and the way their offense is drawn up, they're getting way less turnovers, they're shooting way more efficiently, and on the offensive end, they're playing amazing. And most of that, I'd say, is due to coaching, and just the players are more willing to be coached and buying into the system. And then you got, on the other hand, you have defenses still the same, if not even better than last year, just because of the more willingness to play defense, the more hustle, stuff like that. So now we're going to be looking at some other stuff on why I think the Celtics are way better than last year. The biggest difference I see between these two Celtics teams, the one from this year and the one from last year, is that on this year's Celtics team, there are less egos to manage, less big egos to manage, and there's also less shot makers and shot creators on this team. Now, if we look at that Celtics team last year and who they lost, they had Kyrie Irving, one of the best shot creators in the NBA today, and probably one of the best shot creators in NBA history. You got Marcus Morris, who's a very good shot creator and he wants to get his shots. Then you got Terry Rozier, who's very cocky, confident. He wants to get a lot of shots. And I'm glad that all these players went to different teams and got what they want, because they didn't need Terry Rozier, because his ego was just way too big for that team. He didn't really fit in with that system. The Celtics are usually a more humble team, and Kyrie and Terry Rozier just didn't really fit in there. Marcus Morris was a big loss, but all these players went to teams, and now they're putting up crazy numbers because they're getting a crazy amount of shots, because those are the type of players they are, and they were trying to play more team ball last year, and that just didn't work for these players. The Celtics also lost Aaron Baines, which is a big loss. Might not have been at the time they lost him, but looking back at it now, and he's just killing it on the Suns and shooting threes and just obviously setting hard screens and getting good rebounds, which he has always done. It's a big loss for the Celtics, and they could have really used that right now on this team, even though they're 11-2. But we're going to be talking about how they need a center in the long run. And also Al Horford, who was one of my favorite players, not one of my favorite players, but he was just such a good player that you want to have on your team. The leadership, the passing, the defense, the outside scoring, everything. He can even score inside, the unselfishness, the leadership, everything he brought to that team. I really want him to stick with the Celtics because they needed that center, and he would fit in perfectly with what they're trying to do and everything. But they did get rid of him, which kind of makes sense because, his role would have been diminished, and he kind of wanted a bigger role, so that's why I went to the Sixers. As well as, he needs some shots too, and just balancing his shots along with everyone else's shots might not have worked out. But the Celtics gained 2 key players on their team that I think were big for them. They get Kemba Walker, who is an elite point guard in this league, and he's just fitting into his role nicely, and that's one of the biggest changes too, is the roles, but we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. Celtics also gained Enes Kanter, who's just a good big man that's out there. He knows what he needs to do. He has his role. He's just out there to get rebounds and to put them back up, set screens, pick and roll. He knows his role. Kemba Walker knows his role. He's the primary scorer. He's also the primary ball handler. He knows his role and where to kind of draw the line where he's not shooting too much, and he's trying to affect the game in other ways. His defense in this Boston Celtics system, he's been trying more on defense. He's been hustling more for rebounds, and that's something that you'd really like to see out of him, especially after you paid him all of this money in the offseason. And probably one of my biggest reasons for this Celtics team really doing good this season is the coaching. I have seen a big significant coaching change this season, and it's not because the coaches changed, because Brad Stevens has always been there, and he's always just been an amazing coach. But last year in particular, people were kind of, hating on him, and, people thought that he was going to put this all together, because 2 playoffs ago, we've seen the Celtics do so well without Kyrie Irving and Hayward, and they're like, oh, well, they're just going to put them back in the rotation, and they're going to be a 60 to 70 win team, but that just didn't happen. It was hard to manage all of those players and all of those egos, and lots of the blame did get put on Kyrie Irving, but lots of blame also did get put on Brad Stevens, which wasn't really fair, because the team just wasn't built for him. And now that this team is built more for him, and the players are actually buying into the system, they want to play team basketball, they want to win, they are more driven to win than individual success, then that's why you're seeing this team 11-2 right now at the start of the season. Now this could all change. They could do worse down the line. I don't know when you're watching this video, but right now they're 11-2 and they're just dominating the league. Another thing is that everyone is playing their role, which is another big thing that I really liked about this offseason, and what I like about this season so far. Everyone is playing their role significantly. Like I said before, Kemba is the primary scorer, but he doesn't go too overboard. He can still facilitate and pass to others, and he's very unselfish, even though he's the primary scoring option on the team. He's also trying more on defense and hustling more for rebounds. And then you got Jayson Tatum, who is probably the most inconsistent player on this team, but he's still scoring 20 points a game. He knows what he needs to do. He's that shot creator, and he's that energy, and he's there in the clutch too if Kemba's having a bad game, and he's just that secondary scorer that they really need. Marcus Smart's that secondary ball handler. He's also their primary defender, their best defender on the team, and he could also score if need be, but he's not known to be a scorer, let's be honest. Gordon Hayward has also become he's gone back to his Utah Jazz self, which I'd really like to see, because last year was not a good year for Gordon Hayward, and I thought that was going to stay like that, but I'm glad he's having this bounce back year. I'm glad he's having more touches, he's making more shots, he's just being more aggressive, and I really like Gordon Hayward and how he's been playing. I also like how he's been handling the ball more, and how he's been passing more, and given that playmaking role and expanded on that. And then you got Jaylen Brown, who's probably the second best defender on the team, and he's also very athletic. He's their third or fourth scoring option. This all is going to change too, because Hayward's out with an injury right now, so hopefully he comes back fully healthy. But yeah, all these guys have their role, and they're buying into their role perfectly, and there's no problems right now. Like, their roles, they're playing their roles that they need to play and that they've been added to. Again, with Enes Kanter, when he was healthy, he was playing his role. And then you look at this too, everyone has a role. Everyone knows what they are, and they are exceeding expectations on what their role is. If we look at the team last year, not everyone had their role. Jaylen Brown was kind of lost in the shuffle. You had some players that were just lost in the rotation. Not really lost in the rotation, but just lost their role on the team. And that was a big thing that they needed to address that they just didn't. And now that this team's been more flushed out of all the egos and all the shot creators, I feel like now that everyone has a role and everyone is playing significantly better in their role. And I'm really impressed by this Boston Celtics team so far. Another thing is their offense is just being drawn up so well. Everyone is getting the right amount of touches. Everyone seems content right now, which was a big problem last year. You know, there weren't enough touches to go around and not enough shots to go around. The Celtics ended up struggling with, you know, more eternal problems because of this, and also on the court, you know, who's going to get these shots, who's going to take these shots, and then people would be mad if they didn't get their shots. We also look at the Boston Celtics slowing down the pace, which I said before, and just being more efficient and being one of the more efficient teams in the league, one of the most calm, controlled, just one of the most deadly offensive teams in the league right now. They're just so smart of a team, and I think that they can make a big run if they keep playing like they have been. They're playing smarter and more in control of the game, which you would love to see from the Boston Celtics. Now, we're going to be answering the question, are they a title contender? And I think I'm on the brink of yes and no, because how they've been playing right now, I think they're definitely a title contender. But there's a couple questions I still have with this team. One of them is the depth, which I haven't really talked about. They got rid of lots of scoring depth, but they don't really need any scoring depth. They have guys that could just, again, play their role, like Daniel Tice. He's been doing very well as their starting center with Cantor out, and he's just been a good shot blocker and floor spacer. You got Robert Williams, who again is their shot blocker. And you have a couple other players who have been playing good for them. But overall, this team, they are playing very well. They don't need as much depth, because as long as they have those main 6 players, they can run a shorter rotation and even a longer rotation. They have guys that could even come in. Like, they don't need Daniel Tice and Robert Williams. They don't need them to be amazing, because they just need them to play their roles. They don't need them to be more than they are. You also look at this team, and one of the big questions going into this season, and one of the big questions I have for them is adding another big man, because, you know, Enes Kanter is known as one of the worst defensive centers in the league, if not all time. And then you look at that bench, and they don't really have a good backup big. I'll correct myself. They don't have an amazing backup big to make up for Enes Kanter's defense. So there's been lots of rumors of the Celtics getting a big man after they lost Al Horford as well, getting a defensive traditional big that could just play their role. You know, there's guys like Capella, Steven Adams. And I think if they got a guy like Steven Adams, which they do have the assets to get Steven Adams because they have lots of young players, they could maybe trade like Romeo Langford and a first-round pick for Steven Adams. I think that would benefit both sides, and I would just love to see the Stash Bros together again. That's one big thing. And the second big thing is, if they did get that other center, I think that would push them over the edge, and I think that would make them a true title contender. But if they're going up against the Bucks, how are they going to guard Giannis? You know, Marcus Smart or Jaylen Brown would have to guard Giannis, and I really liked Al Horford last year because of his defense and, you know, that leadership. But I think this team will be okay. I think they are a true title contender in the East. I think that they'll finish very good in the regular season. Another thing is, Boston Celtics teams usually tend to do better with lower expectations, like we've seen mostly when there's lower expectations, like this season on the Boston Celtics. They usually overperform those expectations, but like last year, people were expecting them to get 60 to 70 wins, and that was just so unrealistic, and they missed that mark completely because those expectations were so high, and now they're not so high, and now they're playing very, very good. But what do you guys think of this Boston Celtics team? Let me know down in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to join Sports Source Nation. That's all for me now. I'll see you in the next one. Take care, and goodbye.